What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with the video. We got a good one today. Must draft running backs. We did wide receivers last week, so check that out if you have not done so already. And I'm going to do the same thing as last week and not include the very high end. You don't need me to tell you that Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler are elite picks. Everybody knows that. So for this video, the cutoff for running back is going to be the running back 10 by ADP. So no Jonathan Taylor, no McCaffrey, Henry, Eckler, Harris, Cook, Mixon, Swift, Jones, Kamara, all those players ineligible. So, first running back on the list today, Travis Etienne. He is the running back 21 off the board and is my running back 15, which is an early third round grade. Now, this take does hinge a little bit on James Robinson's recovery, and I fully understand that. If James Robinson comes out, he is 100% in week one, then I would not consider Etienne a must draft as a running back 21 off boards. But also, he wouldn't be, right? So his ADP right now has the assumption from many people that Robinson is not going to be 100% in week one. If it were to happen that he was, there's no way the ADP would remain the same. The ADP would go down, and I would probably still end up liking him. But Robinson tore his Achilles on December 26th. That's a 9 to 12-month injury at least. So a week one return is a fairly optimistic timetable. That is right at the beginning of his potential recovery. We've only ever seen two running backs really return from an Achilles injury and be like, have any form of success. Donta Foreman was the first, though it took him 3 years to be relevant again. And then Cam Akers last season, but he was horrendous when he came back, so it's kind of tough to call that a success. We'll see how he does this season. And the NFL did a study 2013. They indicated that no running back has ever returned to their pre-Achilles form. They can return, but no one has ever returned and been just as good. The best argument that we have for Robinson right now is really just that medical treatments have vastly improved in recent years. And the list of running backs that have even torn their Achilles at all, like the total list of running backs who have done this, it's mostly scrubs anyways, or maybe people later on in their career. So, the sample there isn't all that fantastic. But again, even if it ends up being true that he does return in week one, good to go, I'm bullish on Etienne because it doesn't even matter all that much. It's not like he goes down to like a 7th or 8th round pick. He's still going to be heavily involved in the receiving game, get plenty of work on the ground. The only work that's really going to be taken away from him is some on the ground, which, as you've heard me say plenty of times, is the least valuable touch for a fantasy running back. I don't care if Robinson comes back, he is like 95% of what he used to be, and he takes some work on the ground, because we're going to get some carries, we're going to get some touchdowns, and we're going to get receptions from Etienne. That's what's so important. And there's a reason that he went in the first round a year ago. He was an elite receiving back in college, but was also able to handle 13 to 14 carries a game. And now that Trevor Lawrence doesn't have, Urban Meyer, he's got an Urban Meyer free summer, he might actually develop a little bit into the player that we all know he can be and why he was taken as the consensus #1 overall pick. We need to remember how horrible of an off season and beginning of the season the Jaguars had. There was just no chance that Trevor Lawrence was ever going to develop last season with just how terrible the culture was. Give him a better off season, give him a better coaching staff. This team's going to look significantly better this season. And until Robinson is playing with no restrictions and we think he's definitely going to be good to go in week one, I'm going to aggressively target Etienne at the running back 21 overall ADP. And even if Robinson returns, Etienne's ADP is just going to drop, and I'll still like him as a target, just not at 21. The ADP will be further, so that will be totally fine. Next running back I want to go over is Miles Sanders, 27th running back off the board, my running back 22. That is a mid 4th round grade in a 12-team league. Whenever I say grade, it's for 12-team leagues. Sanders is a polarizing player, though if you've been following me for more than just this season, you shouldn't be overly surprised that I do like him. I just really like him as a player. He broke out in his rookie season, over 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, proving he can be a featured running back. Then his total numbers kind of took a hit these last 2 years thanks to a combination of ankle, knee, hamstring, and hand injuries. None of them were major. He missed at most 3 games with that ankle injury, but they've combined to really hold him back from expanding upon his rookie numbers. But from a per game standpoint, so if you're not just looking at the total numbers across the whole season, because that's obviously very heavily influenced by games missed, from a per game standpoint, he's been solid. His season-long pace, so if you extrapolate his per game numbers over the last 2 years and make it a full season, 1,400 yards, 4.5 touchdowns. Of course, those touchdowns don't look fantastic, but it's, super deflated by 0 touchdowns on 163 touches last season. That's very unlikely. You know how many running backs have scored 0 touchdowns on over 160 touches since 2010? 2. Miles Sanders last season and Melvin Gordon in 2015. Since then, Gordon has at least 9 touchdowns in each of the following 6 seasons. And it wasn't due to a lack of red zone volume for Sanders. I've seen a lot of people argue that they just don't use him in the red zone. He had more red zone carries than Boston Scott did last year, and Boston Scott scored 7 touchdowns in the red zone. It's just getting unlucky. He had 5 carries inside the 5-yard line compared to 6 for Jordan Howard. Everyone's like, they used Scott and Howard in the red zone. No, they used Miles Sanders in the red zone. He just happened to not score. He got unlucky. It's as simple as that. Miles Sanders is the starting running back for the Eagles when healthy. That is a fact. And starting running backs on, high-end offenses don't usually go this late in drafts. I know the Eagles were trash at times last season, and for large stretches last season, they were very, very bad. But think about the upside here. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders. That's an elite group of skill players, and I want to invest in talented running backs on good offenses who have pass-catching capabilities, especially when they're going outside the top 5 rounds and have burned people in recent years, further depressing their ADP. Miles Sanders checks all of those boxes. He is someone I want to target. Next up, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 26th running back off the board. My running back 24, coming out with an early 5th round grade. And honestly, you can just put that last take I just had for Miles Sanders on repeat. I want to target talented running backs on good offenses who have pass catching capabilities going outside the 5th round, who have burned people in recent years, further depressing their ADP. That exact description fits Clyde as well. And the thing is, you can pretty easily see why he's failed so far. Had no real camp as a rookie and also no real time to train. He played in the national championship game and was then thrown into that weird COVID off season. So he just didn't have any time to really develop. Then he has gallbladder surgery after the Super Bowl, loses 50 pounds, barely makes it back to camp. So, and I say he failed because obviously he was a failure of a pick in fantasy. But he had 1,100 yards in 13 games as a rookie. That's not horrible. He averaged 64 yards per game last season in an injury-riddled season. Turns 23 in April, and we know the Chiefs have a massive hole to fill in the receiving game. They have lost 317 targets from last season. 307. That's insane. That is an insane amount of targets. And we know that while drafting him from an NFL football standpoint, a real life football standpoint, it was a mistake taking him in the 1st round. But they still did so because they wanted to use him. And they haven't really been able to do so thus far, given the injuries he's had, given the lack of time he's really had to develop. Again, he was a very young rookie, clearly a talented running back. And here's the thing with the projection. I'm not out here with him an 80% rush share and 15% of team targets, being oh, look, he's barely a value. I'm projecting him for 43% of the carries, not a very high number for a starting running back, and only 8% of the team's targets. That's not that crazy given that they've lost 317 targets and they don't really have any target monsters on the team. Many of these guys are good deep threats, but they're not players who are going to command double-digit targets in a week. He's got a ton of upside to expand on those numbers, and imagine the upside if he does. If I'm already projecting him as a value with those numbers, and he could push way beyond that, a lot of upside. Next name on the list, one that you probably are surprised to see, although I liked him last year, so maybe you're not surprised. But why not Chase Edmonds? He is the 35th running back off the board, my running back 32, which is a mid to late 7th round grade. And I haven't said too much about Chase Edmonds so far this season because I didn't really know what to think, but like I couldn't imagine taking him in the early rounds. If he was going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, that's just a little bit too early for me, too much of a price tag. I don't think I could pull the trigger there. But I checked the other day and I have him ranked as a value, even ranking him as a mid to late 7th round pick, and that just feels wrong. You should not be able to get starting running backs that late in drafts. The Dolphins' depth chart is Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, Myles Gaskin, and Sony Michel. So like those are names you've heard of, and maybe that's what's pulling people off because everyone's heard of all of these players, and they're like, oh, well, okay, like they're just going to rotate all 4 of those backs. But Chase Edmonds is on a 2-year, $12.1 million deal. It's $6.1 million guaranteed. That's not like destroy your roster like Ezekiel Elliott money, but it's pretty decent, right? That's a good amount of money for a running back. But look at everyone else. Raheem Mostert is 30 years old, has 284 career carries through 7 years. I did not make that stat up. And is on a 1-year, $2.1 million deal and is not guaranteed to be healthy for week 1. Myles Gaskin's on the final year of his rookie deal, which was a small contract because he was a 7th round running back. Then Sony Michel was signed to a 1-year, $1.7 million deal, which is like half guaranteed. They didn't even guarantee him over the $1 million. So when you start looking at things, you see Edmonds as the pretty clear lead back in their eyes on an offense that should feature the short passing game, which he's also fantastic in. That's like where he excels, is the short passing game. And he grades out as a value, again, as a mid to late 7th round pick. I usually try to get running backs on my roster early because that's where teams have found the most success, and it's just easy to do so. It's easy to load up on running back, attack other positions in the middle rounds, and then maybe go back to running back later on. But if you can't do that, or you only want to attack running back like barely in the first few rounds, because you know you have a starting running back with pass catching capabilities on an offense that's going to be much better this season, in like the 8th round at times, that is pretty valuable to be able to do. The other running backs going in this range are not starters and are not players that we ever expect to be starters unless there's an injury. Chase Edmonds is the exception, and he's also a pass catching specialist. Shouldn't be going this late. Final running back, go over today. Brian Robinson. He's the 56th running back off the board, my running back 49, which is an early 14th round grade. And I have actually reversed course on Robinson. I don't know if I had him as an avoid, but I was not a fan earlier this season because I still think his like overall talent is slightly overrated. I think people think he's a little bit better than he is, but I'm starting to see how much the team likes him and starting to recognize he's going to see game action right in week 1. And that's not something you can necessarily say about a lot of rookie running backs, that you know for a fact they're going to get touches in week 1. And this is just the type of running back you should be targeting late. I don't think he has a realistic chance of overtaking Gibson while both are healthy, even in a 50-50 split. So I don't even think that there's a chance that Robinson and Gibson are splitting the carries, splitting the touches with Gibson fully healthy. I don't think so. So I'm not expecting him to come out here and in week 2, he's like the greatest waiver ad ever because he had 15 points in week 1 and 16 points in week 2. And all of a sudden we're streaming both him and Gibson, right? This is not some insane offense that they're on. These are not 2 unbelievable talents that are going to average 5.5 yards per carry, and we're going to be playing them no matter what. But I do expect him to be a popular waiver ad in week 1 because I think people are going to be a little bit surprised at how much work he does get. If they're rotating drives, if he's coming in goal line situations, which are things that we expect might happen. And if you have that role already in week 1, it does open up the upside for number 1, standalone value. If you really needed a fill and you were desperate and someone's rotating drives and getting goal line work, you can do it. And that's valuable in the 14th round. When you have your top 2 running backs on bye and injured, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's week 7. I just need someone. We're all going to be in that situation at some point this season. And if he is rotating drives and getting goal line work, you're going to be thankful you can just get some sort of production from him. But it also opens up the door if there's an injury. And we've seen Gibson hurt each of the last 2 seasons. If he misses a few weeks, well, now you basically have Gibson, but you got him in the 14th round. So that's a lot of upside as well. I'm not expecting, an Elijah Mitchell situation where the starter goes down in week 1, misses the whole season, and now you've got like a low-end 1 to a high-end 2 for the entire year. That is a very optimistic outcome for Brian Robinson. That is something that does not usually happen. Mitchell obviously got very lucky last season. But it's also pretty rare to find direct handcuffs that will also mix in for work on a regular basis. You could honestly just be getting Melvin Gordon from last season in that Javonte Williams-Melvin Gordon split, but in the 14th round. And if it doesn't work out, who cares? It is your 14th round pick. If you find out week 1, week 2, oh, he's actually not rotating drives, he's not getting goal line work, he's getting like 3 carries a game and maybe a target, you cut him. You're not married to your 14th round pick. There's going to be fantastic waiver options over the first month. We'll know early on what Brian Robinson's role is. We'll be able to cut him if we need to. So those are my 5 must draft running backs, at least as of early June with ADPs as they are. Camp, preseason, ADP changes, all going to impact things plenty. So please make sure you stay up to date with my latest rankings and projections for every scoring format and every league size, because that is important too, at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.